Hey everybody, Stinky here with a new video guide. This is my final Destro PvP guide for the expansion, War Within. The Midnight expansion is hitting in a few months, so you'll still have plenty of time to gear up and queue up, and hopefully hit your rating goals for the season, get your transmogs, get your weapon enchants, whatever you want. So here's a video outline. I'm going to go over a little bit about myself. I'm going to talk about why play Destruction in the first place, because it's super awesome. I'm going to talk gearing, so stats, tier sets, crafted pieces, gems, enchants. I'll talk a little bit about race choices, and then we'll go into talent points. Hero talents for both hero talent specs, and then Warlock talents, Destro talents, and PvP talent points. Then I'll go into rotations. You need to know 3 different types of rotations: your opener, your standard rotation, and then your burst rotation. And finally, we'll touch on playstyle so that you can get the most out of your Warlock and really make it fit your approach to the game. Whether you're aggressive or you're a defensive player, you can make Warlock work for you. A little about me: I'm a Warlock main. I've been playing Warlock since the Burning Crusade, mostly PvP. I do dabble in PvE, but these days my main focus is solo shuffle and solo blitz. I play all 3 specs. You can see here that I am currently in rank 1 range for all 3 specs in solo shuffle, and in rank 1 range for Blitz as demo. I love playing Warlock. Destro right now is probably the most fun spec of the 3 in the War Within Season 3, but all 3 are great. So I'll make updated video guides for all 3 specs. These days I stream a lot and I continue to make updated PvP and Blitz guides. You can find me streaming at twitch.tv/smellystinky and youtube.com/@smellystinky. Drop a comment, I'm happy to answer questions. And if you drop by the stream sometime, happy to give you any tips and pointers on playing Warlock in general. Okay, let's dive into the guide. The first question we should answer is, why play Destruction in the first place? So Destro is one of the most dynamic and flexible Warlock specs. It fits into a lot of different compositions in 2v2 and 3v3. It's also very, very good no matter the situation in Battleground Blitz. And it's also very good in solo shuffle. It can face against melee, it can face against casters. It's a little challenging to learn because you will get focused a lot of the time. Anytime you're in a fight, everyone goes after the Destro lock. However, if you can deal with that pressure and you learn to kind of weave in more instant casts and get some precognition buffs and get some chaos bolts out, you are a major threat and you will determine the flow of the game. We've seen Warlocks, Destro locks win in the recent Arena World Championships. It's a really, really strong and very good spec. It plays well with other casters and with melee. And the class fantasy is super fun. You are really the caster who's doing a ton of damage to everybody, fire and shadow everywhere. And you know that whenever people see your green chaos bolts flying in slow motion across the screen, they're freaking out. They're ice blocking, bubbling, hiding, running from you. You are in total control at that moment, and it's one of the most satisfying things you can cast in the entire game. Okay, let's talk gear. So gearing in PvP is really simple these days. There's basically 3 stages of PvP gear that you need to know about. The first is honor gear. You buy it here at Valurd. Valurd sells honor level gear, which scales up to 717 in arenas and battlegrounds. That's pretty good. It's not top tier gear though. And you can purchase this with honor. Honor you get just by doing any sort of PvP in the game, whether it's instanced or in the world. It doesn't matter. If you're doing some sort of PvP, you're gaining honor. The second stage of gear is bloody token gear. It's from doing war mode activities, which means you turn on war mode, and then you go around and do world quests, you do some bloody token quests, and you can get this gear. It scales up to 727 in PvP. That places it pretty close to top tier gear, so you can use this to hold you over until you have full conquest gear, which is over here, the 3rd stage of PvP gear. This is all best in slot stuff. You gain conquest by doing all sorts of PvP activities, especially rated arenas and battleground blitzes. All this gear scales up to item level 730, which is the top item level you can get in the game currently. So this is best in slot. With conquest points, you can get the best gear in the game. You do not need to do any PvE. Now, some of the top level PvE gear will also be item level 730, so you can use that if you want to, but it's totally unnecessary. If you want to just do PvP, you can succeed no problem. In terms of stats, there are 2 approaches you want to consider depending on the kinds of PvP you want to focus on. If you only do Battleground Blitz, if you only do Battlegrounds, you might focus mostly on haste and mastery because that'll improve your damage output the most. But it'll leave you a little bit squishier. You're going to be easier to kill. But if you're good at sitting at the back of a team fight and blasting away, this might be the build for you. However, for most purposes in PvP, especially if you do any arena whatsoever, 2v2, 3v3, or solo shuffle, you're probably going to want to focus mostly on haste and versatility, which you can see I do here. I'm all haste, all versatility, especially versatility. So basically, if you do only blitz, you can focus on mastery and haste above all. But if you do a variety of PvP, I would highly recommend you focus on versatility and haste, and then mastery, and then crit. Crit, by the way, in PvP is nerfed by 50%, so you basically never focus on crit as your main stat. In terms of tier pieces, you generally want to wear 4 pieces of tier when you're playing Destro. Certainly when you're playing Hellcaller Destro, you need to wear 4 pieces of tier because the 4-piece bonus is extremely good for Hellcaller Destro. For Diabolist Destro, it's a little bit less necessary. It'll add a little bit to your damage, like 2 or 3%. Not a huge deal. You can just skip it and go with 2-piece instead. But in general, I think the 4-piece is worth using. You get tier pieces that you use in PvP by going over here to the Catalyst and you stick a PvP piece, so something that'll scale up to 730 in PvP. You stick it in the Catalyst and it'll convert it into a tier piece that will then scale up to 730 as well. The 4 tier pieces I recommend getting are the helm, shoulders, chest, and gloves. You're going to skip the legs because they're the least well itemized for PvP. For crafted gear, you really just need 2 pieces because you need to have 2 what are called embellishments. You can have only 2 embellishments active at any given time, and in PvP, for Warlocks, the best embellishments are going to be Elemental Focusing Lens. You can see I have it on 2 rings here. It basically will give me a passive damage proc every now and then. It's pretty nice. If you're not a tailor or jewel crafter yourself, you simply submit a crafting order. You can do a public order through the crafting order system and put in a little tip and somebody will craft it for you. Just make sure you add the mats that you need and you add the missive that determines the stats you want, like haste, versatility, and then you add the embellishments, focusing lens. Good to go. You can craft more as well if you want to really dive in and tailor your stats as much as possible. You can see here I've got engineering crafted bracers that let me stack a lot of versatility, but this is just min-maxing a little bit. It's not necessary at all. The item level is the same and you don't get any special bonuses out of crafting more gear. In terms of gems, there's one gem you absolutely need. It's called Cognitive Bloodstone. This is a special gem. You can have only one of them equipped. It'll give you main stat, which is super important. And it gives you precognition. This is a really important buff. Basically, whenever somebody else uses an interrupt on you, like a pummel or kick or spell lock or counterspell, something like that, and if you are not casting at that moment, basically if you fake cast, they try and interrupt you and you stop casting before they interrupt you, you'll get this buff called precognition. It'll give you immunity to crowd control and further interrupts for 4 seconds. This is super important as a Destro lock because this will let you get out a bunch of chaos bolts. You really need to have this gem for sure. The other gems, totally optional. I stick a bunch of versatile sapphires in here for max versatility. I just like to be tanky, but you can put in mastery gems, haste gems, a mixture of haste and mastery, mixture of haste and versatility. It doesn't really matter, it's just fine-tuning your stats. To get sockets in the first place, talk to Hotharn over here. He sells these Astral Jewelers settings that you can use on your PvP gear. They're really expensive in terms of honor, so it's quite the grind to get them, but you really only need a couple of sockets to really get started, so you can have a precognition gem and at least one other gem to trigger your embellishments. Okay, enchants, we're going to go from top to bottom. Head enchant, there's none. Neck, none. Shoulders, none. Super easy, right? Cloak, though, you can get one of 2 different options. There's one that'll give you a little bit of speed. It's called Burrowing Rapidity. Pretty good. I think a lot of people use that, especially in Arena and Blitz. It's nice to have a little extra movement speed. Personally, I go with Chant of Leeching Fangs because it gives me a little bit of leech stat, which isn't that important. That basically heals me just a very tiny bit based on damage I do. But it also gives me out of combat regeneration, which I think is really important, especially in Blitz, because you're out of combat between fights trying to regenerate health so that you're ready for your next fight. Chest enchant, you're going to get Crystalline Radiance. This gives you main stat, super important. Bracers, again, you have a little bit of optionality. You can go with the speed enchant. It'll give you a lot of extra speed so you can run around faster. which is good. It's always good in any sort of situation. Mobility is something that Warlocks tend to lack, so extra speed is good. Personally, I find that I'm not the best at kiting, so I just go with the Leech enchant, which gives me a little bit of extra healing. Probably the speed enchant is going to be better for most people, but if you play like I do, which is very aggressive in people's faces and not really kiting very much, then Leech might be better for you too. There's no enchant for the gloves or belt. For your legs, you're going to want to get the spell thread. It's called Sunset Spell Thread. It gives you stamina and intellect. For your boots, you want to get Defender's March, which gives you stamina. Stamina just makes you tankier. It's really important in PvP. And then your rings, you have a lot of options. You get whatever stat you want the most. Personally, I get Radiant Versatility for more versatility. It makes me tankier. I do a little more damage. I think Radiant Haste and Radiant Mastery are also both great options. For your weapon enchant, you have some options. Personally, I go with Oathsworn's Tenacity, which gives me a versatility proc every now and then, which makes me do a little more damage and makes me a little tankier. I think it's the better enchant in general these days. You can get a Mastery proc one as well. Now, the previous seasons, you were using Authority of Radiant Power, which would give you an intellect proc. On paper, that sounds pretty good, but I think it's actually a little bit nerfed these days, or it doesn't scale as well. So Oathsworn's Tenacity is probably the best option. 2 final points on gear. First, you need to get the cloak. It's called Reshi Wraps. It's from doing the quest line in Koresh, which is the latest zone in the War Within. It's a really fun area, it really looks nice, and it doesn't take too long to do the quest line. I highly recommend doing it. You can tailor the stat on it by inserting different fibers, which tailors can craft for you. I think it's a great cloak to get. It has a nice damage proc, and it's really good for PvP and PvE. And the second note is the trinkets. So in general, you need to wear PvP trinkets. You cannot wear a PvE trinket because the PvP trinkets have a set bonus that gives you a ton of extra intellect and stamina. You cannot give this up in PvP. Now you do have some optionality when it comes to the trinkets you use. Generally, you want to use Medallion for sure in every situation. It's really, really good to get out of crowd control when you want to kill somebody or when you need to get out of dodge. And the other trinket is going to be a passive damage proc trinket or an active on-use damage trinket. They're both really good options these days. Personally, I have the passive one here, but I've been testing the badge as well, which is the on-use one. It lines up very nicely when you play Hellcaller because you have a lot of damage on your 1 minute cooldown, and it's a 1 minute cooldown trinket. Really good option too. Let's talk races. The first thing you should know is that races don't really matter. If you really prefer the look and feel of a certain race, you should just play it. It's totally okay. Volpera, if you like small furry things, just play it. It's okay. Now, if you want to min-max and you're playing at the cutting edge, then yes, there are some races that have a little bit of an advantage. I'd say the best races on the Alliance side are going to be Void Elf because it gives spell pushback prevention, which means you're going to get your Chaos Bolts out more quickly and more reliably. And it also has a pretty nice teleport that's very useful in Blitz because it's a hard counter to things like Root Beam and Ice Wall because you can go through them and you can get out of roots. But other Alliance races are excellent too. Night Elf will give you a Shadow Meld, which is really nice to counter a major incoming spell. And Coltirian gives you a knockback and stun, a really great option, especially in Blitz. On the Horde side, the best is probably High Mountain Tauren these days because it gives you a little bit of passive damage reduction for any incoming hits. This is pretty nice because Warlocks get targeted all the time in any sort of shuffle or blitz. You're taking a ton of damage, and every time you can reduce that damage that's coming in the door, your healer is going to be a little bit happier. There are other good options too. Orc will make you better against stuns, and you also have a pretty nice on-use intellect buff. Troll gives you a haste buff. Undead will get you out of fears. These are all really good options. You can play whatever you want. Hero talents. I'm going to talk about Hellcaller first because it is frankly the better hero talent these days. Diabolist is totally viable. You can play it. You can play it at high ratings. It's really strong, has a really nice burst window, and it also has way better animations, and you get these pets that shoot fireballs and all this other stuff. Really cool, really fun to play. However, Hellcaller is stronger right now, and I think it's mainly because of the 4-piece tier bonus, which makes your Malevolence cooldown add a ton of damage to your 1 minute goes. In Hellcaller, the main things you need to know about are Wither. Wither will replace your Immolate, and it's an instant cast. This is extremely powerful. This lets you run around, cast Wither, and it does a lot of damage for you, and it's all pretty passive. See here, Blackened Soul below it? This is going to do probably your number 1 or number 2 damage on your details meter, and it's going to be totally passive. You don't even have to think about it. You apply Wither to as many targets as you can, and Blackened Soul and Wither together will do like half your damage. Zalin's Ferocity and Zalin's Cruelty here, they just add to your damage, you don't have to think about it. Here you have a choice node. I personally go with Curse of the Satyr in all situations. I think it's a really nice curse, especially when paired with Amplify Curse, which I'll show you later. When you cast this on somebody, they cast a little slower, they attack a little slower. It's basically nice to keep this on a healer and also on DPS. The next choice node, I would generally go with Bleak Heart Tactics. This is going to add to your Blackened Soul damage, really important these days. And the third choice node, you will go with Zevrim's Resilience, which is going to add to your tankiness when you cast Dark Pact, which you cast all the time. You will definitely not take the other one, which is going to reduce your overall health. The next three nodes, you can read them. They don't really matter too much. They just add to your damage. Totally passive. You will never play around them. But the final node is called Malevolence, and this is huge. This is another instant cast. You're going to cast it basically every minute, and it'll add a ton of damage to your go. It'll get a lot of haste, you'll get a lot of Blackened Soul damage, and it's going to hit everything that you have Wither on already. For Diabolist, it's a little bit closer to what Destruction has felt like in past years and expansions. You cast Immolate just as before, you want to put Immolate on a lot of targets, and then you're going to get what's called Diabolic Rituals that will summon these big pets that shoot laser beams and big fireballs. They're going to do a lot of extra damage for you. It's really, really fun, and it's worth experimenting with because it's a very, very satisfying thing when you pop a Pit Lord out and he shoots at your opponents. However, Hellcaller generally is going to work better for most people in most situations. In terms of the tree, you'll see Diabolic Ritual at the top. The main thing you need to think about here is that it's going to pop out an extra demon every now and then, and when it does, you can expect to see the health bars of your opponents go down a little bit faster. They do quite a lot of damage. Unfortunately, it's a little hard to time the Diabolic Rituals, so you kind of just do as much damage as you can. They will add to your overall damage. Cloven Souls just adds to your damage. Touch of Rancora, this is going to add to your Chaos Bolt damage, so this is actually pretty important. And the fun one here is Infernal Bolt, Secrets of the Coven. Infernal Bolt is going to proc every now and then, replace your Incinerate, and it'll do a lot more damage and give you a lot more shards. Over here, I usually get the Soul Etched Circles talent when I'm playing Destro. When I'm playing Demonology Diabolist, I'll usually get the other one for Howl of Terror. But usually when you're playing Destro, you want to play around Mortal Coil instead. It's pretty strong as Destro. Here, I usually take Cruelty of Kirkson. This will add a little bit to your damage. You don't have to think about it. And the other choice node, it's probably pretty similar in throughput. On the right side, I'll always get Infernal Vitality. This adds to your tankiness. Really good option. The next three nodes just add to your overall damage. Don't even worry about it. And the final node is called Ruination, which is actually kind of a weird node because it'll occasionally replace your Chaos Bolt with Ruination, which is going to summon an extra imp and it's going to do some damage, but it'll do less damage than you would have done with a Chaos Bolt. However, it's still worth casting because it doesn't cost any shards. So you'll just add it to your rotation and just think about it as extra damage. Alright, let's talk Warlock Talents. The first one is Fell Domination. This is going to give you a backup option in case your pet dies. You can summon one really quickly. This is really important to take in general as a Destro lock because you usually will run with a pet and your pet is pretty squishy and will die often. These three nodes in the middle, they're just going to add to your tankiness. You don't have to play around them at all. To the right are Burning Rush and Fiendish Stride. These are actually great talent points when you're playing Blitz. Only Blitz. They give you a lot of movement speed, but they cost a lot of health, so you're never going to use them in Arena or Shuffle. Fell Pact here is a talent point I basically never take. You're rarely going to get any use out of it, and it's usually better spent somewhere else. Curses of Enfeeblement. These are all very powerful curses when used at the right time. Exhaustion will slow your opponents. Weakness, it's not that great on its own, but when you pair it with Amplify Curse, it'll prevent crits by that person. Really powerful to slow down damage. And then the third one is Curse of Tongues, which is really good to throw onto casters and healers. It'll slow down their casts. Demonic Circle Teleport is really the most important spell for you as a Warlock. Absolutely mandatory point. You don't have very many mobility options as a Warlock, so this is going to be one of your few options. Over here you have a choice node, but you're basically always going to take Mortal Coil when you're playing Destruction. And I'll show you why. On the right side of the tree, there's going to be a talent called Mayhem or Havoc, and you get basically 2 Mortal Coils whenever you cast it. Really powerful way to set up your big kill windows. On the left side, a really great node, I almost always take it. It's called Amplify Curse. You use this, you can macro it with your other curses, and it'll make your curses that much stronger. It's on a longish cooldown, so Teachings of the Satyr can be pretty good too. I sometimes take that, especially in Blitz. And it's pretty easy to use this. You just create macros for all of your curses. There are a bunch of talent points here in the middle that don't really matter too much. They just add to your damage or your tankiness. The one in the middle though, I'll note Abyss Walker. This is a pretty good one. you definitely want to take this. Even though it says 4% extra tankiness here outside, you actually will take 8% less damage when you're in an arena or battleground. It's much stronger there. On the right side is Banish, which you're basically only going to take when you're facing other Warlocks, and even then I usually just skip it. On the next row there's Accrued Vitality and Lifeblood. These are pretty much trash talents in PvP. You'll never take these, especially because Accrued Vitality is tied to Drain Life, which is really terrible when you're casting it as a Destro lock. Sweet Souls will give you a little bit of extra healing, really great node, and Demonic Gateway is also mandatory. It, along with Demonic Circle Teleport, is one of your few mobility spells, so you definitely want to take this. You'll basically use Gate and Port almost on cooldown in any sort of arena, shuffle, or blitz. The center choice node, you're never going to take Horrify. You actually want your fear to send your opponents running away. Instead, you might take Nightmare sometimes when you feel like your fear is breaking too easily, although usually I will skip this node as a Destro lock. Below is Dark Pact. This is one of your most important defensive cooldowns. It's kind of a minor defensive. It's not a huge defensive, but it's pretty good because it's on a short cooldown. You'll use this basically all the time. Dark Pact is especially powerful because you can use it when you're stunned. The middle choice node, you would usually take Strength of Will when you're playing Shuffle or Arena because you rarely get to use your Unending Resolve more than once in a game anyway, so you want to make it as strong as possible. In Blitz, I often take Dark Accord because you will be using Unending Resolve very, very frequently whenever you have a little fight, which is all the time in Blitz. On the right is Shadow Fury. This is a great AoE stun. You're going to pair this with your Infernal Stun pretty frequently and just use it in general. The left choice node is Frequent Donor or Ichor of Devils. They're both actually very good options depending on your playstyle. Right now I'm not spec'd into it, but it is a pretty good thing to get for Shuffle and Arena especially. Stalker's Guile is a really good talent point because it adds a lot to your Immolate or Wither damage, and that's a big source of your damage in general. On the right side is Sargerai Technique, which is a lot worse because Incinerate does almost no damage when you're playing Destro, so you rarely will cast Incinerate at all. However, Sargerai Technique might still be a better option sometimes in some builds because it's a more efficient way to get to the talent points below. Dark Fury is a great talent point because, like I said, Shadow Fury is one of your most important AoE spells. On the bottom is Swift Artifice. This is kind of an interesting talent point that I think is useful only if you do a lot of threes, and your threes games tend to run very long because you might end up summoning a lot of extra health stones during a longer game. However, for most purposes in PvP, you're generally going to skip this node. Demonic Tactics, Soul Link, and Fell Synergy, these are just nodes that'll make you a little tankier. These are really great. You're always going to take them. On the right is Teachings of the Dark Harvest. This is great when you run a Fell Hunter because it'll dispel offensively more frequently, and offensive dispels in PvP are very powerful. Plus, it gives you access to Demonic Resilience, which is really good when you're running a pet. It makes both you and your pet a lot tankier. You will notice a big difference even with just 1 point in this node. Bottom left, Pact of Gluttony. You will always take this node. This is great. You're going to use Health Stone every minute essentially. It's a really powerful heal, and it's one of your few defensive cooldowns. Soul Conduit, this would in theory add to your damage and could add to your burst, but it's not something that you can usually afford, so I usually skip this node. And finally, Soul Burn. You're going to use this with Teleport, Gateway, Health Funnel, and Health Stone. It makes all of those spells way stronger, so you're just going to macro them together. It turns all of those spells, which are already pretty good, into amazing spells. You won't pair it with Drain Life simply because Drain Life is not something you're ever going to cast as a Destro lock. On the right side of the tree is your Destro tree, and the first spell is Conflagrate. This is a really important spell. You're going to be using this almost on cooldown, and this is going to set you up in two main ways. First, it does instant cast damage, so you can't be interrupted. Second, it's going to generate shards and give you what's called Backdraft, which is the next node here. Backdraft will make your next Chaos Bolt a lot faster cast. You really want to have a couple of stacks of Backdraft before you start bursting somebody down with Chaos Bolts. On the right side, you're going to take the Rain of Fire option on the left because you basically don't cast this in PvP except to hit the ground somewhere where you think there might be somebody stealth and you just want to pop them out of stealth. On the left is a choice node, but you're always going to take Roaring Blaze. This adds a lot to your damage. Backlash here is going to give you an instant proc on your Incinerate every now and then, which is just nice to cast on the move. In the middle is a choice node, both very good options. Havoc is something you can cast on a target, and it's going to duplicate spells onto that target, which means you can get 2 Mortal Coils, 2 Chaos Bolts, 2 Soulfires, whatever you want on them, and that's a ton of extra damage, ton of extra control. Really powerful. But Havoc is usually only the better choice in a 3s setup-based playstyle, where you know you need to line up your Havoc, Mortal Coil, Chaos Bolt combo all together at the same time as your teammate. But when you play better and better players, especially better healers, they're going to be dispelling Havoc immediately, so you're going to get very little value out of it. So I tend to go with Mayhem instead in most settings, certainly in Blitz and certainly in Solo Shuffle, where it's a little bit more chaotic. Mayhem will give you a Havoc proc every now and then. It's actually pretty frequent. You're going to have a lot of uptime on it, and you'll be duplicating spells all the time. It's a little bit of a liability because you can't control what it procs on. It might hit a pet or something that you don't really care about duplicating spells on, but it's still a really nice source of extra damage and control. Hyrogenics is something you're just going to skip. You never cast Rain of Fire in PvP, at least not to do damage. And Cataclysm is really good. This is a really useful spell when hitting a bunch of targets that are all clumped together, or when you're trying to hit somebody from behind a pillar, your AoE from Cataclysm will actually hit them behind the pillar too. Indiscriminate Flames and Scalding Flames, these both just give you extra damage. You don't really need to play around them. Here you've got a little bit of an option. I'm spec'd into Rolling Havoc, which gives me a little extra damage. Its uptime is probably around 1 to 2% extra damage at any given time. But other good options here are going to be Conflagration of Chaos and Explosive Potential. These are both really good nodes too. You can't really afford all of them though. Over here is Shadowburn. Now this is the other part of your rotation that's instant cast, adds damage. You're going to use this with Conflagrate. Basically on cooldown, you will try and save up a little bit depending on when you're trying to burst somebody down. The main thing to know about it is that it's going to spend soul shards instead of generate them like Conflag. And you want to spend soul shards so you can get to your Ritual of Ruin faster. I'll show that in just a second here. Here you've got a choice node, Summoner's Embrace or Grimoire of Sacrifice. They're both pretty good options. If you're new to Warlock and you're not really keen on doing a lot of pet management and you don't want to heal up your pet when it gets low, you can totally just sacrifice it with Grimoire of Sacrifice. It'll add a little bit to your damage. You get this spell lock out of your Fell Hunter when you sacrifice it. You're actually usually going to take this when you're playing Blitz and you're in a situation where your pet will probably die in a team fight very easily. However, in Arena and Shuffle, you're generally going to go with Summoner's Embrace because it's going to give you a little bit more tankiness through Soul Link. You're going to have more utility with your pet because your pet can offensively dispel and it can interrupt for you while you're casting other stuff or if you're CC'd. Really powerful to go with Summoner's Embrace, but it does require a little bit of pet management. Ashen Remains, you'll always take this because you want to get that extra damage with your burst combo. On the right is one of the most satisfying spells you can cast as a Destro lock, Channel Demon Fire. Unfortunately, it's pretty weak in PvP these days. It was good in prior seasons, but right now it's not doing that much damage in PvP, so I usually skip this, unfortunately. Blistering Atrophy here on the left is not really the best node. It'll add a little bit of damage to your Shadowburn, which you are casting frequently, but you could put this in Explosive Potential instead. Emberstorm and Flashpoint, just think of these as extra damage nodes. Pretty nice, you're going to take them. And in the middle is Summon Infernal, which is kind of the cornerstone of your burst rotation. Every 2 minutes, you're going to cast Infernal. It's going to do a big AoE stun. He's going to do a ton of extra damage for you. And with Crashing Chaos below, he's going to make your Chaos bolts hit a lot harder. So a lot of your kills are going to follow an Infernal cast. Eradication simply gives you extra damage. You take this. For the next choice node, you're going to take Reverse Entropy. This will give you a haste proc, really powerful, tons of extra damage and extra procs you get out of your haste. The other option is Internal Combustion, which will increase your Chaos Bolt burst by about 1 million or so every time you cast Chaos Bolt, which sounds pretty nice on paper, but ends up being kind of a liability because it consumes your Wither duration, which can be very annoying, especially if your Wither expires as a result. You're going to lose a lot of extra damage that way. Devastation and Ruin, these just add to your damage. Passive nodes, great nodes. And in the middle is Ritual of Ruin. This is the second part of your burst rotation that you kind of need to track, which is how many soul shards you've spent. Every time you spend 15 soul shards, you get this buff called Ritual of Ruin, which makes your next Chaos Bolt cost no shards and it's super fast cast, really hard to interrupt. This is a huge part of your burst window. It'll help you get 3-4 Chaos Bolts off in a row. So if you can line this up reliably, you're going to get a lot more kills. On the left is a node that a lot of people skip. I think I'm one of the few high-rated Warlocks who takes Soulfire. With Soulfire with Decimation, I think is actually a very, very strong spell to add to your arsenal. It is an extra keybind, but it is going to add a good bit of damage to your burst. And importantly, it's going to generate a lot of shards for you, especially if you have a Mayhem proc at the same time. You can cast Soulfire, you'll get 2 more shards. That's 1 more Chaos Bolt you can get off right then. It also happens to be a fire spell, which is great because if somebody interrupts you when you're casting Soulfire, you can go on and cast Wither or Fear or Chaos Bolt and just go on with your day. Improved Chaos Bolt and Chaos Incarnate, you're just going to take these. These add to your Chaos Bolt damage, hugely important when you're trying to kill somebody. On the right is Burn to Ashes, which I think is a pretty bad node. I see a lot of Warlocks taking it. I've seen AWC Warlocks taking it, but I think it's actually kind of a wasted node. You're not going to get a lot of extra damage out of your Incinerates, so that point is better spent elsewhere. Master Ritualist is a mandatory node. You need this to get your Ritual of Ruin faster. And below it is Avatar of Destruction. This will add to your Ritual of Ruin burst window. Again, very important. On the right, you've got some pretty good options in terms of where you spent your last node. I'd usually get Power Overwhelming. This is going to add to your Chaos Bolt burst damage just by a little bit. It's not huge. Another good option is Dimension Ripper. Again, this is a passive proc. It's going to give you a little bit more damage every now and then, but it's a little RNG. You can also go Dimensional Rift if you're having trouble getting your Chaos Bolt combos out. It's another instant cast that's going to add a lot of damage to your rotation, especially your kill window. Or you can get Diabolic Embers at the bottom. This is going to add a lot to your Soul Shard generation. This will help you get to your Chaos Bolts. Again, Incinerate doesn't do much damage on its own, but it is going to help you get to your Chaos Bolt kill windows. The final node really isn't going to add much damage. You're basically never going to take it in PvP. In terms of PvP talents, I think Blizzard has done a pretty good job of giving you a lot of really good options depending on what the situation is that you're facing. So Bane of Havoc is the only one you're basically never going to take. Well, actually no, there's two. Bane of Havoc and Bonds of Fel, they do almost no damage, or they're bugged, or they're just terrible, I don't know. I never take them. Nether Ward is really good against casters. It's going to reflect, and it's going to make you really annoying to people like druids who are trying to cyclone you, or elemental shamans who are trying to burst you down during their ascendance windows. Gateway Mastery. This is a great option for when you're playing Blitz especially. Also in threes sometimes if you're very coordinated. I would not take this in solo shuffle. I think it's a liability because it makes your gateway so far you might actually outrange your team and just completely just die on your own. But it is great in Blitz. You're going to use this a lot, especially on maps like Temple of Kot Ogu or anywhere where there's a lot of mobility required. Shadow Rift, again, great in Blitz, not so great in Arena. It's going to be a really nice tool to kind of mess with people who you're facing. Especially in Blitz, you can teleport your enemies to your circle, and you can set up your circle like in the water in Gilneas or on the edge of a cliff somewhere, and somebody else can knock them off the cliff for you. It takes a little practice to get the hang of it, but it's actually a really fun and very powerful spell. Impish Instincts, I will take this usually when I'm facing a warrior, because the warriors have a lot of charges and leaps and things to get to you, so this will help you stay ahead of them just by a little bit. Bloodstones is not really something you're going to take very often. I actually only take it when I'm just kind of messing around with friends, but it will add a lot to your damage, and it's really powerful during that small window. However, it replaces your Demonic Healthstone, so you're usually not going to take this one. It's just more of a kind of like just for fun. Fel Fisher is the one PvP talent that I basically always take no matter what the situation is. I really like it. It will slow down your opponents when you're Chaos Bolting them. It also adds a healing reduction effect. Even if you have teammates who have slows and have healing reduction effects already applied, like a warrior or a rogue, you're still going to benefit from Fel Fisher, especially when you're trying to hit somebody who's off on their own. Finally, Soul Rip. This is a great talent point. I usually use this defensively to try and slow down incoming damage, but you can also use it offensively to slow down the healing received by your opponents. Really powerful. It's only on a 1-minute cooldown, so I'd use this often. If you're not sure what to use and when, then as a starting point, I would generally recommend going with Nether Ward, Soul Rip, and Fel Fisher as your 3 default PvP talents. They'll serve you pretty well in almost every situation. Alright, let's talk rotations. So rotations is a little bit of a misnomer in PvP. In general, in PvP, you're not really just going through the motions of casting stuff on rotation like you do in PvE. It's a little bit more of a spell priority system. However, there are 3 basic priorities you need to think about. The first is your opener, so you make sure you hit the ground running, you get your dots up, and you're applying pressure right from the get-go early in a fight. Second, you need to know your standard rotation, so you're constantly applying pressure throughout a game. And then third, you need to know your burst rotation so that you can land your kills and close out your games. For your opener, you simply want to cast Wither on as many targets as you can. Wither is going to get you going. It gives you soul shards, it gives you haste procs, it gives you damage procs. Really important to cast Wither and keep it rolling on as many targets as possible. You're going to cast Immolate if you're Diabolist, and you're going to cast Wither if you're Hellcaller. Second, you want to cast Amp Curse, Curse of the Satyr if you're Hellcaller, or if you're playing Diabolist, you go do Amp Curse, Curse of Weakness, or Curse of Tongues on whoever you think it's going to annoy the most. Then you're going to go into your standard rotation, which is pretty simple. You're going to maintain your Withers no matter what. That's priority number one, because if Wither falls off or gets dispelled, you need to reapply it ASAP. Second, you're going to cast Conflag and Shadowburn, essentially on cooldown. Especially if you're new to Destro, I would simply cast them on cooldown, spam them. But if you're a little bit more experienced, you might save up a couple of charges, especially of Conflag leading into your Ritual of Ruin window, so you can do mega, big, and fast Chaos Bolt burst windows. However, again, it's not a huge deal if you simply cast them on cooldown. Then if you have a Decimation proc, you want to cast Soulfire. Only when you have Decimation procs. You never cast Soulfire by itself because it's way too slow. But with Decimation, it's an amazing proc. And then you have two modes that you'll sort of flip between when you're in your standard rotation. The first is when you're low on soul shards and low on pressure. You're going to cast Incinerates to generate soul shards, and you're also going to do things that are like utility based. So you're going to cast Fears, you're going to cast Curse of Tongues, you're going to kite around, exhaust your opponents, that sort of thing. And then when you have a lot of procs lined up and a lot of soul shards saved up, you can kind of flip the switch and start casting Chaos Bolts, dumping shards. Even though you're not really trying to get a kill, you're just trying to apply a little bit more consistent pressure during your standard rotation. For your burst window, there's basically three things that you kind of want to have lined up if possible. In an ideal scenario, you have your Infernal ready to go. Summon Infernal is going to be a huge part of your kill window, but it's on a 2-minute cooldown, so it's only every 2 minutes you can cast your Infernal. Second, you need your Malevolence ready to go. This is your minute cooldown. Again, this adds a lot of extra damage to your go. And third, if you have your Ritual of Ruin lined up, you are ready to blast somebody out of this world. So Ritual of Ruin is basically going to count the number of shards you have spent. When you first enter a battle, it's going to be at 0, and as you cast every Shadowburn, you're going to increase it by 1. Every time you cast a Chaos Bolt, you're going to increase it by 2. Once you get to 15, you're going to get a really fast cast Chaos Bolt, which is important towards your kill window. This is kind of the hardest thing to play around. You want to be keeping track of when you're around 11 to 13 shards spent, and then you want to save up some shards and line up a big Chaos Bolt, triple Chaos Bolt window, especially if you can get it with a precog. So to recap, your biggest kill opportunity is going to come with Summon Infernal into Malevolence, into Ritual of Ruin, bunch of Chaos Bolts, so much green fire everywhere, people are going to die. And that is pretty much it. After you've gone through your burst window, if you haven't gotten a kill, you simply go back to your standard rotation. You're making sure Wither is on as many targets as possible. You're going to make sure you're using your Amplify Curse of, Curse of the Satyr on somebody, and then you're going to be blasting, generating shards, doing some CC, dumping shards, and then getting ready for your next Ritual of Ruin or Malevolence kill window. And that's really the basics. That'll get you started. If you master all of that, you can easily achieve essentially any ratings goal you want. But the really fun thing about Warlock is that the playstyle can be pretty flexible, and you can tailor your talents and your PvP talents and your gear and everything to fit your playstyle and do the most you can based on how you want to play the game. For example, your pet choice can be pretty flexible. You can play with a succubus, especially in 2v2 or 3v3 if you want to try and set up more reliable CC on an enemy healer before you cast your Chaos Bolts. You also might switch up your talent points a little bit if you want to focus more on instant cast because you're having trouble getting casts off when you're getting targeted by a lot of melee. You can go with Dimensional Rifts. Or if you're having trouble playing around Decimation, you might skip Soulfire and put those talent points into passive nodes. Or if you're playing on a large map, you might take Gateway Mastery so you can take advantage of the extra space and kite a lot more. There's too much to cover in any single video, but feel free to drop by my stream anytime, ask me some questions, happy to answer them, happy to teach people, both old and new players, how to play Warlock, especially these days. It's a really, really fun class. Right now, Destro is one of the best PvP specs in the game. And fingers crossed it looks pretty good for Midnight as well, the next WoW expansion. That drops in a few months. We're just now starting to see a little bit of information about the changes and balancing decisions and things like that. It looks like Destro will be pretty fun. All the Warlock specs look pretty good, especially Destro and Affliction, and hopefully Demo, which is one of my favorite specs. And we'll just see going in. And if there are a lot of changes, we will play with them in the beta test and in the pre-patch, and we'll hit the ground running with a brand new Destro guide sometime after the next expansion lands. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this. Again, if you have any questions, drop them in the comments below or hit me up on twitch.tv/smellystinky. I'll also drop the build descriptions below, and you can also get more information on builds and add-ons and macros and things like that from my Discord. Just type !Discord in my Twitch chat and you'll be able to get a link there. All right, everybody have a great one. I hope to see you in battlegrounds and arenas. Good luck and have fun with your Destro locks.